The only wide receiver involvement we really saw that ended up with production was a 4-yard run for Seth Anderson.
Mm-hmm. Well, to me, if one person was dropping the ball, that might be on the player. But when every receiver is dropping the ball, that seems to be on the coach or the program that they're using to train them.
Thank you for some logic, sir, because I feel like I'm arguing against logic with people when I've had so many people make the comment, well, Brian can't make the receivers catch the ball. Okay. All right. So you have issues from A to Z over a number of years through multiple personnel over multiple positions, multiple execution issues in different forms. And we're just going to blame the individuals. I made the comment when Logan Jones snapped the ball over Deacon Hill's head. Well, hey, it's not George Barnett's fault. Everybody wants to fire George Barnett. That's Logan Jones. George Barnett can't snap the ball for Logan Jones. These college football players are reflective of their coaches. Mm-hmm. I don't know why that's such a hard concept for people to understand. People can disagree with me if they want. But are the players not reflective of the coaches? Anyways, Doug, I got to let you go because I violated my own rule. But I really enjoyed this phone call, and feel free to call back in if you want when Coach Patterson comes in.
Thank you. I love watching you. Thank you,
sir. All right, that was a fun call. I love these interesting conversations, and that kind of, you could see, hit a nerve with me because I just couldn't disagree more with the notion that it's not just Brian's fault. No one's blaming Brian specifically for an individual drop, but when you see it collectively and you see a pattern of behavior, that's reflective of coaching. Whether you're talking about Kelton Copeland or Brian, or if it's a tight ends coach, it's Abdul Hodge. I mean, if it's a running back dropping the ball, then I'm going to give some blame to Liddell Betts. That's just what this is. And ultimately, the onus falls back offensively to the offensive coordinator. And that, last time I checked, was Brian Ferentz and the head coach, Kirk Ferentz. This is not hard, in my opinion, but it's hard for some people. And Lemansky coming back with a super chat. Players are a reflection of their coaches. Furthermore, they bring them to campus for our futures. Alabama for years reflect Coach Saban. I agree, Lemansky. That's where I stand on it. Apparently, that's not a consensus opinion by everybody else. That's where I stand, and I'll double down on that stance because this is the college. It's less of an onus on the coaches in the NFL because guys are getting paid, and I mean, obviously, college guys are getting paid some, but the NFL is 1,000% a business. With that being said, I also don't excuse the players. Like Deontay Vines has had issues with drops; those got to get resolved. Seth Anderson had a drop today on a very catchable throw toward the sideline. That's got to be caught. Caleb Brown's drop last week, inexcusable, has to be caught. But it's just, you don't blame one source. I tend to put more blame on the guys who are supposed to be coaching these inefficiencies out of these young athletes, these young teenagers. But that's where I stand on it. Here's one thing I do have a problem with, and I brought this up at the outset of the show, Don, and I'd like to get your perspective on it. We've talked about it before, but I promised someone that reached out to me during the game that I would ask you this question because I know where they stand on the question. I know where I stand on the question. Two-part question, Don. A, are wide receiver, tight end, running back drops, all right, pass drops, are drops a part of execution? Yes or no? Is that a part of lack of execution?
Define execution. Is execution simply the playing of the game?
Well, that's
part of the game, yeah.
You consider that to be a failure of execution?
A certain percentage of the drops are absolutely a failure of execution, yes.
Okay, so what would be an example of drops not being an example of execution?
A ball that was tipped by a defender, maybe. It curved off one hand and it went to the receiver, but he only had a split second to catch it. You could argue that's not a drop,
but a real drop comes back to execution, correct?
Yeah, in general it does, yes.
Okay, so my question to you is, who do you blame for drops? Because drops have been an issue these past 2 weeks. Who takes the blame for drops? I know what you're going to say, but who takes the blame for drops?
Well, I know what Coach Fry would say. He would say, I don't blame the receiver. I blame the coach. That's what he would say. He always put the blame on us. And it had a good effect because the players thinking, now wait a minute, I'm the one that dropped the pass. Coach Patterson didn't drop it. And Coach Patterson's a good guy, so I don't want him to suffer. So I'm going to find a way to eliminate these drops. Now, here's one thing that we used to do, and to my knowledge, they haven't done it in years, but we did it all the time. I give Hayden credit for this. Every coach has a manager. And during every practice, every last ball was charted. In other words, at the end of every practice, I would know, and of course, over a 2.5 hour practice, there'd be a lot of balls thrown, and you'd have a lot of chances to catch or drop a pass. So we knew that one receiver was catching at 94%, the other receiver was only catching at 88. And you always heard me say, Corey, that's a big difference because we don't judge them by the ones they catch, we judge them by the ones they drop. So if you're dropping only 6% of the time and I'm dropping 12% of the time, I used to tell my receivers, Corey's twice the receiver I am because he only drops half as many. I'm dropping twice as many. He's twice the receiver that I am. And the emphasis for that is for a reason. One drop pass could be the difference in the game. So the bottom line, if it's a drop on an individual basis, the receiver has to own that drop. I will admit a quarterback can contribute to it. A ball that's thrown a little off target. Imagine a slant route that's thrown behind the receiver. That's a tough catch. But even if it's a tough catch, you heard me say the other day, Corey, if a guy sells up for the ball, imagine a go route, he leaves his feet, he dives for all he's worth, and it skips off his fingers. That's not a drop. But anything short of that's a drop. And the simple explanation, if you can touch it, you can catch it. That's what we used to say. And we had some receivers that were awfully, awfully reliable, primarily because they were born with good hand-eye coordination, I'll admit that. But they also had the mindset, I'm going to play all day without a drop. That's my goal. I'm not going to take anything for granted. Maybe when I'm a freshman, I have a couple of drops simply because I didn't look the ball in. Well, I'm sitting there thinking I'm a bonehead for failing to look the ball in because it's simply lack of discipline. So from that point forward, I'm going to be sure I look the ball in, and then I'll worry about what I'm going to do after the catch. But I'm not going to make any assumptions about a catch. I'm never going to take it for granted. I'm going to look the ball in every time. Does that help?
It does. And just to kind of piggyback off that answer, Don, if you have multiple receivers failing to execute, specifically with drops, doesn't that come back to, well, if this guy's having problems with it, this guy's having problems with it, this guy's having problems with it, maybe it's the tree, not the apple? Like maybe we're not coaching these guys well enough?
Well, one good point to bring up, what type of passes are they having difficulty with? Here's a radical thought. Let's set up a drill so that we can rapid fire, give them reps on those kind of throws. And obviously repetitions do a lot, as long as they're good repetitions, as long as you're doing the right things. People do things the wrong way sometimes with their hands. There are certain passes where they're thrown. A receiver might try to make a catch with his thumbs in over here. And the only problem with that is you might notice my forearm here is restricting my vision toward the ball. Well, wouldn't it be easier maybe to have thumbs out, my hands in this position, and now I have a better chance to look the ball in? So stuff like that, thumbs in versus thumbs out, and it just comes with experience. But as you progress through the program, you're very unlikely to have your hands in the wrong position for a certain catch. So it gets back to coaching again. It gets back to eliminating technical errors. That's another simple example on the curl route. Well, if you're running a curl route and you're squared up to the ball's coming at you. Obviously, your thumbs are in, right, for that catch. They have to be. But what you got to do is understand, I got to be sure not to stab at the ball. An inexperienced receiver will extend for the ball. We want you to extend for the ball, but the trick is to be able to cushion the ball on contact. You actually give a little bit with your hands. To me, it's kind of like throwing a ball into a net, right? It's going to be caught in the net as long as as long as the hand's cushioned, then you're less likely to drop the ball. You don't want to be stiff with your hands on contact. You want to cushion the ball. So if that's a problem, well, you throw the guy a thousand curl routes, and he understands what you're saying after a while about being able to cushion a pass. Does that make sense?
Yes.
A little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. And my whole point, my take on this whole situation, and obviously you understand the physics of making a catch and fixing those issues on an individual basis. My issue is when people say, well, it's not Brian Ferentz's fault that this guy can't catch, or it's not Kelton Copeland's fault this guy can't catch. They're coaching these guys. They're developing these guys. They're recruiting these guys. So we're just going to blame all the individuals and not look at, oh, you've got execution issues all over the place, not just with drops, but with blocking and with route trees and with all these things and with quarterback play. And you can't hit the broadside of a barn in the pocket. Like, doesn't that all come back to we have an issue and it's bigger than just individuals, especially when these problems are stretching beyond one game, 1 month, 1 year, 1 season, one group of players? Like, what's the common denominator with all these things?
Well, if you have an issue with execution, Hayden Fry would say, that's a problem with your coach. That's what he would say. Because the players, of course, function as their coach to do so. So if you correct mistakes, then obviously you're enabling them to play better and to eliminate mistakes. And if you're not getting that done, then it's an issue of coaching. And at some point, Hayden would say, if it persists, then I got to find another coach.